Consider that the society that we have today is the result of the actions that were taken from past generations. Each generation has an obligation to have creativity, to produce knowledge, innovation, and to pass that on to the next generation for the next generation to grow. This comes also with responsibilities. In this case, the generation of the 50s, there is a great future in plastics. It was well documented that plastic was all about Tupperwares. That was making families happy, women happy. It was a culture. Plastic was it. We had found the epiphany of what is life about. But time goes on, and here comes the next generation. Is Tupperware, which now will be an image for plastic, truly recyclable? Is it a material that disintegrates and that biodegrades? The next generation has found out. The answer is no. Imagine 430 million tons of plastic put as waste on land. 15 million directly into the ocean. Now, do you know what those numbers represent? One car represents 1 ton. In California, there are 14 million cars registered in the state of California. Every year, all those cars are dumped in the ocean as if it was plastic. Now think about this next time you're on the freeway. So what's the problem with that? The problem with this beautiful plastic is that they live for a long time in the environment. 20 years, that's a short time. Most plastic stay in the environment 450 years up to 600 years for nylon. This is a long time that gives the plastic to travel around and to be transported by the lifeline of what Earth is made of, water. Everything is related to water. Plastic travels to water. Plastic is jamming those systems that are basically the bloodstream of planet Earth. Eventually, this plastic ends up in large bodies of water, namely the ocean. Most organisms in the ocean can see plastic bags as food or can just accumulate plastic without discrimination because they just take everything that is in their face. And for some other organisms, natural environment has degraded so much that the only thing they can hold on to is plastic. This is an issue, but the most important issue to me is that we also pass that on to the next generation. We are training our next generation to recognize plastic as something like food, in case of organism, but also we as a society, we promote plastic through different ways. We need to change that mindset. So this is what I just said, a good summary of what we learned for what we call the macroplastics, the big size plastic that everyone sees and has seen on social media or has witnessed in the environment. Those big sizes of plastic eventually break down into smaller sizes. We call them the secondary microplastic, which are the little pieces of plastic that come from a larger piece that used to be functional, your water bottle, your plastic bag. As you leave them aside on the trash or in the landfill, these will be weathered through UV and through mechanical action, and they will produce small pieces of plastic, smaller and smaller and smaller over time. So all what you see that is large plastic will eventually become invisible. It will be so small. But we also create microplastic, small to begin with. Everything that we use, lotion, lipstick, all the cosmetics, all the wear, the fashion wear that we have, the shirts, and of course the tires, all these materials produce microplastics as we use them. We are now surrounded by microplastic as we speak. Those are microplastics that are barely even considered in policies nor in the scientific world. Why are they so important? The smaller the pieces, the more likely they are to spread around, and the more likely they are to go into the food web. The food web is the basis of life, together with water, and preventing that to happen will be key. Of course, we have one planet, and water is what unites us. Across this planet, we have several ecosystems, and each of those ecosystems are connected to one another. We cannot just save the ocean without saving the rivers and the lakes and the snowpacks, right? We are to be considered that everything is global. This aspect of microplastic is very difficult to tackle because it's a dynamic problem. It is very wide, it is global, and it is dynamic. Things change over time, from day to day, from season to season, which makes the credibility of science even more complicated. We can say there is a lot of microplastic there at a certain time, then policymakers go there a month after, and it's not there anymore. We have to understand the biology of plastic, the biology of microplastics, so that we can get better policies. We also have to remember that we, as human beings, are part of this environment. You and I are made of water. We are a reflection of our environment. We are a reflection of the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. Speaking of this, already 7 or 8 years ago, analysis of microplastics in water was made. More than 90% of water that you drink contains microplastic. And this is not only in the United States. And this is not only a water bottle. This is also the water fountain. Because once you pick up water from the spring, it is transported through PVC pipe to plastic containers before it reaches you and I. And don't try to think that this should push you to drink something else than water. Beer, wine, all the liquids are of course impacted since they use water to begin with in their process. As I mentioned earlier, food is also an issue. We have microplastics in our food. We have microplastics in fruits, in plants. I have people coming to me and say, oh, I'm not eating fish anymore, there is plastic in fish. Well, there is plastic in vegetables, apples. I put this picture to represent food for a very specific purpose. If you think about plastic, it seems like an inert product. It is used to make your water bottle, after all. It is not reactive. You and I, as kids, we all have been eating sand, right? And we are still here. We didn't kill us. So, the big question that people ask, we ingest plastic. We breathe it, we drink it, we eat it. Is it bad? Some of you here are parents, and there's a big rule, the 5-second rule. Something drops on the floor, 5 seconds, you can still take it up and eat it. Now, imagine those pieces of plastics have been around for hours, years, months, decades, and you eat them. Imagine how much pathogens, how much chemicals are attached to these pieces of plastic. They have traveled the world. They have gone through waste treatment plants. They have gone through the top of the Himalayas, maybe. But you breed them, eat them, drink them. And that might be a problem because of what's on them, not necessarily about what they are. So the issue of toxicity is always a big question. How do microplastics hurt us? There is, of course, the mechanical hurt. Those microplastics will jam your system. Imagine those, if they go into your bloodstream, they will just be jamming your veins and your bloodstream. So it has a mechanical effect for sure. But that depends on the size, it depends on whether they're pokey, it depends on so many variables that is very difficult to address. The other way that microplastics have an effect is through the chemical impairment. Obviously, as I told you, microplastics, as they travel the world, pick up different chemicals, pathogens and other things on them that you end up, having in your body. So a big question that scientists always relate to is, what about the true plastics or the new polymers, the ones that biodegrade, like also natural polymers like cotton? So this is a concept that we are debating. Imagine that plastic, true plastic that lasts forever, is this bucket of metal. And inside that bucket are all the different chemicals that plastic has been accumulating over time, or that has been accumulating during the production of the plastic. This bucket only loses tiny fractions of plastic, in this case through evaporation, for example. Now go to the other side here, where the polymer will be a natural polymer, a biodegradable polymer, that over time shows weaknesses, will break apart, will show holes, and will lose those chemicals much faster, more readily than this plastic. Those are the two extreme conditions that we can assess as scientists. And why is this important? Because if you use a natural polymer, and this represents the interface tissues, whether your lungs or your guts, whatever is made of natural polymer, like cotton, will be stopped by the first layer of your body, will be stopped very soon and not propagate around Earth, because it will degrade. It is made to degrade. It is made to fall apart, and so it will leach and release all the chemicals very readily. This is very, very different from polymer, like plastics, because these will hold on to their chemicals and live for 600 years and travel from your skin down to the very core of your body, your heart and the other vital organs, and slowly seep their chemicals there. Very different pathways of toxicity, very difficult to assess because of different scales of time and space. In summary, we can just say that synthetic polymers, because they are slow to disintegrate, slow to biodegrade, and slow to release these chemicals, they will have an action to cause a physical impairment. They will also, of course, diffuse their toxic chemicals into the environment and into your bodies or your cells, causing a chemical impairment that will be chronic, as opposed to natural polymers, where they biodisintegrate faster, they biodegrade faster, they release their chemicals faster, but they will not cause a physical jamming. They will cause an acute localized toxicity, perhaps, yes. This is the difference between a synthetic polymer will cause cancer, lung cancer, whereas a natural polymer might trigger bronchitis. Very different processes, very different outcomes. So toxicity is still at the very essence of how we can address it, considering all those diversities of variables that affect the processes. But beyond Tupperwares and plastic bags and bottles, the question now is, how do we engage the young generation? It's all about giving the next generation the tools to move forward, to learn from the mistakes that were made in the 50s and to learn from the observations that we made now. How can we address the future? Something that is touching the new generation is fashion, especially fast fashion, which unfortunately, fast fashion is based on plastic. Most of what you and I wear contains plastic. There is, of course, the issue of consumerism. Why do we need to buy a T-shirt every day? My grandparents were not doing that. Yours neither. We need to change that mindset on how people do things. Because today, I work in this place, and it's overwhelming to see that you can barely see the sand in some areas. There are so many clothing, so much textile waste because of the consumerism coming from our society. But at the end, this is a visible problem. I want to go back to the micro invisible problem. As I said, microplastics are generated by our textiles. When you wash your clothes, about 2,000 particles of plastic are released per item, meaning that you have 700,000 items per load of clothing, leading to about 12 million tons per year of plastic that is invisible and not catchable by the wastewater treatment plants. This goes directly into the ocean. This goes directly into the food web, and it goes back at you. This is a lot of plastic that has never been accounted for. We have not even counted the plastic coming from the dryers. I'm sure that all of you enjoy drying your clothing in an hour, as opposed to the good old days where we were hanging everything for days sometimes because of the weather. But drying this for an hour now has a cost that might impact the next generation. These microplastics and microfibers in general, coming from clothing, are somewhat beautiful. We image them like this. We inhale them every day. We drink them, we eat them. You breathe them from your pillow. You breathe them from what you wear. They are about 10 to 100 times smaller than the diameter of a hair. So they can go everywhere, anywhere, at any time. It is very difficult to teach about microplastics and microfibers that are so invisible and touch the new generation. So the only way I can do that is by going to schools. And I encourage scientists to do that. Go to high schools where students enjoy fast fashion. Bring them to the lab. Show them those pictures of the microplastics and microfibers. Engage them. But also, we need to bridge the gaps between academia, industry, and education. This is what we try to do, working with foundations like the OR Foundation, which is a very strong activist of textile waste in Ghana. The Walter Munk Foundations for the Oceans, that is very strong activist about education, but also working with chef works, who, believe it or not, they are concerned about how much plastic a chef who wears plastic with fire-resistant chemicals can contaminate your food? Very good question. Also, other companies like Bertin Technologies, which help us measure airborne plastics, because believe it or not, even though it's obvious, we have very few technologies to do that these days. We work with Lenzing, which provides alternative materials that can replace plastic in your clothing. And then we go with Axon J and AOS, which are companies that help us devise new methodologies to quantify plastic and control plastic, because this is such a new field that we don't even have the technology to investigate properly these levels of microplastics that are so global. And then, of course, in terms of education, we work with Ecomente, which is a platform that network all the high schools around the world so that we engage high school students into measuring plastics where they live and try to compare that to where other high schoolers are and try to exchange data on the problem of microplastics. And I also work with Gate to the Arctic, because everyone sees the Arctic as this beautiful area wide with polar bears, even though they might be swimming rather than walking on ice. But trust me, there is also a huge amount of plastic there when nobody lives there except for those polar bears. Some priorities that we look at as scientists will be addressing the textile waste. People, reduce what you wear. Look at your wardrobe and fix things if they have a problem. Do not trash them right away. We have to teach them. We have to look at textile weathering. How does your vest, your t-shirt lose microfibers due to sun exposure or to mechanical abrasion? We are actively working on that. We have to look at microplastics and microfibers in lungs, because that's what we breathe, but we also look at the intestine, working with medical schools, with physicians. And of course, working with technology to develop this and to allow this to happen. The big question being, is it toxic or not? Are we going through lung cancer or bronchitis because of microplastics and microfibers? And of course, there is a global vision to keep in mind. Working with the World Sky Race, we collect microplastics from around the world in the atmosphere. That's a project that we have. But with that, we should also measure microplastics from water and from food, from all the communities, because there is only one planet Earth that we all share. And we have to have this global mindset. And all this for what? Because I don't want the next generation to have plastic in them to begin with, because this might be the reality. Thank you.